Okay, so firstly, thank you everybody for coming. I just randomly about, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks ago thought, well, we need to do something interesting and who knows what the world will be like. And what's a favorite book sitting on my bookshelf? It's Give and Take by Adam Grant. Let's throw it out there. It will be a bit refreshing for people to think about something completely different. I always get feedback that there's not enough time in breakout rooms, so I'll try and give you a little bit more. There's also that balance between content and you guys sharing stuff. So we'll see. People who've come to any of my events in the past know that you get randomly put with somebody else. And so there's hopefully a bit of networking that goes on as well as some of the content. I'll try and finish. Well, I know most people have a hard finish at 2, but I might even finish a bit before. And so hopefully you're able to sort of shut down everything else that's going on and learn something and think a little bit about a few different things for the next, 52 minutes, give or take. So first thing I'm going to do, which I like to do, and I actually have found occasionally I do it at the beginning of a coaching session. I've had 1 or 2 clients and they appear at coaching and they seem really flustered. And so to get them to regroup, I get them to check out, to check in. So those of you who've done this before, grab a piece of paper or the notes page on your phone and just take a minute to write down what is on the top of your mind, all the things you need to do this afternoon, all the things that you sort of were in the middle of, but you took a pause to kindly come onto this session. So I'm just going to give you a minute to do that. It can be paper, notepad, whatever. It can be buy milk or ask someone else to buy milk. Or
buying milk is on my list.
Your family will be grateful. And when you've done that, just make eye contact. Okay, now what I want you to do is to then write the heading feelings or emotions, because any good psychologist should talk about feelings, and just write down what emotions you're experiencing at the moment, and don't worry about whether they're contradictory. And don't worry about whether your English teacher would like the range of your vocabulary and how eloquent you are. Just top of mind what you're feeling. Okay, now we're going to do what I call a relaxation quickie. I might, I'll do it the way I normally do it. Okay, in your head, quietly to yourself, tell yourself 3 things that you can see, 3 things that you can feel, physically feel, and 3 things that you can hear. Now, don't write them down, relying on the memory. And now tell yourself 2 things from the initial list that you can see, 2 things that you can feel, and 2 things that you can hear. Now tell yourself 1 of the things that you can see, 1 that you can feel, and 1 that you can hear. And then you might just want to take a long, slow, deep breath, either into your belly or chest, whatever you like to do. And now I'm mindful that I could be the only person who's in a dress, so you may not want to do this exactly the way I'm going to do it, but I want you all to stand up and have a big stretch. And yes, I did want to show you that I'm wearing a dress, but if you've got trackies on, well, we've all done that too. Have a big stretch, see if your fingers can reach the roof. Roll your shoulders if you want to, one direction, roll them the other, spin from side to side, loosen up a couple of bones and creaks and whatever else is going on. Okay. Now, last thing is take another piece of paper or another note page on your phone and write down what you'd like to cover, what you'd like to get out of today. Okay, so what am I going to cover? I'm going to give you a bit of background on me, talk to you about givers, takers, and matchers, the benefits, the advantages of giving, and what the flow and effect of that is in the workforce, the downsides of being a giver and how to protect yourself against that, and how to keep accountable. So most of you know me, but just, briefly, I've been organizational psychologist for about 24 years. I've been coaching predominantly for the last about 20. The first 4 years of my career were more around consulting. And I quickly realized that I find it extremely rewarding to work one-on-one with an individual. And my purpose from my work is to really allow everybody to do what I do, which is bounce out of bed excited about their workday. And I believe that if you've got a good boss, then you're going to love your work. And so where I feel quite privileged to have an impact is either with those bosses who've been newly promoted, who are having this sense of, oh, golly, what got me here isn't going to get me there. And to finesse with them the nuances of what it is they want their leadership style to be and how that will enable them to accomplish their purpose within organizations. The second group of people I work with are those who've been in their roles for a bit and they're just completely overwhelmed. And sometimes, yes, it's some general well-being stuff that we do, often in combination with also looking at what are they doing and have they stepped up in their focus? Are they delegating? Are they collaborating? How are they getting work done through people who don't report to them? Often they're people who've been in their job for a year and they're like, I'm floundering, and if I maintain this level of workload, I'm going to burn out. So that's sort of, and then the third group of people where the boss approaches me and says, Tamar, they're 99% great at their job, but the 1% where they're not is really causing a terrible ripple effect in the organization. So can you come in and see what you can do to tweak and improve their leadership behavior and their self-awareness and their emotional intelligence? And I think for me, what I find most rewarding is when I follow up with my clients and increasingly I'm doing it with their bosses as well, 6 months later, and I see the ripple effect that the people around my clients are thriving. And so while I don't work with large organizations, I don't work with large groups, I just work with individuals, I hope that that what I do has an impact. So that's enough about me, and now it's time for you to all learn something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw you into breakout rooms and with a question, with a discussion topic, which is to talk about your experiences at work, good or bad, with somebody who you describe as a giver who did lots, or somebody who you describe as a taker who just sort of never gave you anything in return. So experiences, good or bad, at work with a giver or a taker. So I'm going to send you out to breakout room. So Adam Grant, who is, I don't know, popularized the phrase givers and takers, is I think he still is, the youngest Wharton professor of organizational psychology. And he wanted to look at, well, what goes on in organizations? Do people help each other? Don't they? Is it a tit for tat? How does it quite work? So he found through his research that there were 3 types of people that existed. There were the givers who they gave with no expectation of any immediate gain. They were never too busy to help. They were generous with their time. They looked for opportunities to help each other, and they preferred to contribute to others. what was interesting with the givers was that he found that some of them were highly successful, some of them were CEOs and professionally did extremely well, and others were not. Others were stuck at the bottom of their careers. And I'll talk in a minute as to what it was that distinguished between those givers who excelled, for whom it was an absolute character strength, and those for whom it seemed to, unfortunately, prove to be quite negative in terms of their career aspirations. The next group, so they're the givers. The next group were the matchers. So they're the ones who, for want of a very Aussie phrase, tit for tat. So they would help you if they knew you were helping them. And they spend time keeping score. Almost, look, I don't know, if anyone in his study actually had a little black book where they wrote down, well, I helped Bill with the year end for accounting, so he's going to make sure that he helps me with such and such. That will take a certain amount of time. The interesting thing with them, though, is that it doesn't come necessarily from a place of, it comes from a positive place. They believe in equity in the world. And so it's about people should be just, and it's fair to give and to receive, and to have sort of some balanced score. Then you have this third group called the takers. So the takers just ask and ask and ask, and they have really large networks, but that's because they burn through them, and they have to constantly be finding new people to reach out to, because they just keep asking others to do things for them, and they're trying to get as much as possible from an interaction. So it's never about the other person, it's always about them. What's particularly interesting that can go on in some organisations is that the matchers group, who believe in this just world, well, they perform a bit of a balancing act. They start to gossip about the takers, and it's almost like it's healthy gossip, because it's a way to keep the takers honest. So they will dob them in, for want of a really crude way of describing it, but that it's their attempt to keep the balance, and also in a way to protect those who give and give and give, and who are potentially suffering from the giving. The interesting thing that Adam found with his work was the beneficial effects to an organisation as a whole, and to motivation around giving. So I'm just going to share, this is am I going to share? Yeah. It's fabulous, is that, he says the greatest untapped source of motivation is a sense of service to others, to focus on the contributions of our work to the potential to make us more productive, rather than thinking about helping ourselves. He conducted one of the studies he cites in his book is a study that he conducted in a hospital. And it's quite timely, actually, because it's all about hand washing. And next to a whole lot of those, you've seen them in the hospital push things with a hand sanitizer underneath to encourage hand sanitizing in between seeing patients. The one floor in the hospital, he randomized, it was all a bit randomized, but in one section had a phrase down the bottom that said, hand hygiene prevents you from catching diseases. And the other experimental group, the sign said, hand hygiene prevents patients from catching the diseases. And what he found was that the staff were more motivated to clean their hands when they saw the impact on other people than on themselves. And I think that, some of the more recent discussions we have around purpose and around workplace purpose relates in part to this idea of giving to other people. And the other thing that he found was that organisations with a culture of giving have collaboration, high innovation, good quality, service excellence, job satisfaction, better productivity, customer satisfaction. There's even lower costs, there's lower turnover, and there's a supportive culture and that's bred within the organisation that's apparent. to the customers, to suppliers, to talent. So the question is, well, then what should you do in your organization? Should you be creating this culture of giving, and how and what types of initiatives would work in your organization? Where do you have input? Now, I know now we have, starting in some of the large corporates, like a department that's looking after corporate responsibility, that looks for altruistic volunteering opportunities for staff. There's practices around, a day off to do volunteering, et cetera, et cetera. But it's also around the smaller stuff. I will play a song. I'll pause and play a song because I think that this is, I want a bit of music in here. So this is sort of the grand scale idea. It's Christmas time. Okay, so I won't play the whole song, but the idea of Band-Aid was, here you took these influential individuals and they wanted to change the world. They want to feed the world. They want to change the world. And there will be people within your organization who want to take on a big project like that, and they'll find like-minded people. And when it's done in a genuine manner, and you can see the organizations where these endeavors are lip service, and when they're genuine and the individuals in the organization relate to what's being done, the customers see it, it's part of the culture. On a smaller scale, there are some interesting practices that go on in some places. One is a thing called a reciprocity ring, where either through an electronic platform or actually people getting together, it's a forum where somebody can simply put up a request. The request can be, I need a plumber. The request can be, I need somebody from the design department to help me finesse my presentation that I'm about to give to a client. A request can be, I want the opportunity to understand the finances of this business and a 2 days secondment into accounting. It can be extremely varied. And by posting them in a group, what happens is that people in different parts of the organisation look at ways that they can help each other. It could just be from an introduction, because potentially somebody in IT doesn't know anybody in finance yet, but there'll be a link through the reciprocity system. There was a group set up called GiveTas, which Adam Grant set up. It was like on a global scale of helping like random people helping each other in this way. And it's just a creative, innovative way of starting to create the contagious aspect. It's also something that managers can do and senior people in an organisation can do in the way they respond to a request and to a question that comes to them. And when it's done kindly, then people are encouraged to ask more. And also, we'll discuss how to make sure that generosity doesn't undercut productivity, that it doesn't undercut fairness, that the takers aren't, out there making all the requests, and the matchers aren't sitting around measuring it up, and the givers aren't spending all day long just responding to requests. But to start to create that culture within the organisation where, I always think of the old, it's not in my job description, as the most conversation ending comment that could ever be made in an organisation. And it raises my hackles and would with most people. It's like, hang on, but I really just asked you, where's the Vegemite? I'm being facetious, but sometimes that I'm not helping culture has started to permeate. And so reigniting it and looking for creative ways. And if you're not creative, and I'm not creative at all, then it's reaching out. It's saying to someone, I want to build a culture of giving that becomes fun and seamless and not overburden. It's not going to overburden anybody. Who's got some ideas to help me do this? So you're already throwing out to other people the idea, and to start to get the culture going. The problem, as I mentioned earlier, is that we've got some givers, who excel. They become the CEOs. They are running them out. They are running these international companies. They're doing brilliantly. And then you've got these ones who are not only fumbling along in their career, but they're becoming doormats. They're on the verge of burning out. And I think that what happens, and I don't know, I'm having a bit of fun with the music today, but I'm just going to play you a little bit of this clip, because this is sort of, how some people will think giving is going to be.
If you ever find yourself stuck in the middle of the sea, I'll sail the world.
Bruno Mars can bop along. Yep, I'll sail the world. I'll go find you. You'll be in the middle of the sea. The fact that I can't sail, that I don't swim, it doesn't matter. I'll go out there. And I think that then what happens for people is that it's actually more of this sort of experience.
Why you look so sad? Tears are in your eyes.
I think that, and I'm no, literary analyst, but when you hear that second song, it's like, yeah, I'll stand by you, but it's not going to be that easy on me. There's a line further along in that song that says, I've seen the dark side too. And I think that, it's starting to encroach on this idea of, well, what is compassion fatigue and what goes on. So what did Adam Grant do? He looked at, what are these excellent givers doing? How are they able to maintain their energy, maintain their well-being, do brilliantly at work, and yet still have these attributes of helping and be kind and be compassionate? And what is it that the group who are floundering down the bottom of their careers and overburdened by the amount of help, what's the difference? And those givers who are very timid fall into the trap of being taken advantage of by the people who are takers, who are extremely assertive. And so where a boss can get involved is to help people learn some things around some tricks and tips to limit what and how you give, but still, and I think, I think the most ironic aspect of the people who seamlessly give and never say no and never have any boundaries or limits is they burn out and they are no longer effective and they're no longer giving. And then they're not only longer giving to the extraneous requests, but they're no longer giving to their team in their day job, because they've just, and so they're actually in their effort, and it's a really sad thing to see, because in their efforts to be kind and altruistic, they're actually causing more harm to themselves and then greater workload to other people. So one of the, I don't always talk about boundaries, and I sometimes go, well, Tamar, is that your favorite word, boundaries? But I think that when it comes to what Adam Grant saw worked with the givers who were successful, was that they set limits on their availability. And they set limits on their availability in a number of ways. One was the time. He actually said for himself, he's this busy professor and he's prolific. He writes books, he does podcasts, he does blogs, he's like forever doing something else. He has office hours. And in those office hours, students can come for questions, but they're set. And actually, if you send him an email, he's got this automated response that says, thank you very much. I respond to external requests on a Thursday. And that's it. So if you set your request at 5 p.m. Thursday, you're going to wait a week. He's sort of put some limits in terms of time around when he's available for work, but which also enables him, and he saw that with the other givers, enables the productivity and also to get his own work done and everything else that he needs to do in his life. The other boundaries that the successful givers take is around the nature of the help. So sometimes they give a referral because they're not the person for the job. Sometimes also, what's really interesting is we all have different areas of expertise. if somebody came to me and said, you know, Tamar, how do you, you're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, how do you do your finances? I'd say, here's a number of here's a number of 2 accountants, get in touch with them, choose one. It's not my expertise. And Marie, not wanting to flag you out there, she's got more qualifications than I do in that area. It would be very, it actually wouldn't be very helpful to the person who's making the request. But the other thing that happens is that if you define your areas of expertise for help, number one, people then know, well, you know, you are the person I go to for this type of request, so that the people who are seeking help aren't as, they're not wasting your time, they're not wasting their time, it's more seamless for them. But also as the giver, there's a sense of accomplishment and achievement, which ties into Desi and Ryan's research around motivation. So it actually becomes quite self-fulfilling and enhancing when you're giving the type of help around the areas of expertise that you want. And it also becomes it doesn't feel like an obligation. There's an experience of flow, which is good for well-being, and there's help in a particular area. I think that what the givers do very well is they pause when the request comes in and they think about, is this my stuff? Do I know this? And I think that the compassion fatigue aspect comes up a lot in the workplace with givers, where there's a sense of high empathy with the experience of their co-workers. So to be more specific, you know, when somebody breaks their leg at work, we call O. We don't try, and we may know a bit of first aid, but I don't know about you, but I wouldn't trust myself to not do any more harm. And I wouldn't think twice about calling the first aid worker on site or calling O to get somebody with medical expertise. But when there's an emotional issue going on and somebody's unburdening a lot to you, occasionally, to too much of an extent, the leader or the colleague will become the social worker or the psychologist. And there's a lot that's draining around that. And yes, it's very awkward to encourage somebody to go somewhere else for help. And it's a delicate thing. And I'm not saying you don't have a listening ear and you refer straight away, but to be mindful of the scope of your expertise. You know, I have the word psychologist in my job title, but I'm an organizational psychologist. My knowledge of mental health and mental illness and treatment of mental illness is similar. Well, not the same, you know, as all of you. Yes, I got stuff in my undergrad, but it is not my expertise. And I know that there are things that I will straight away refer on and encourage my my clients and people who come in contact with me in sort of general life. You know, I make referrals, and I think that we need to be really aware of that. I think the other area that's going on that's really hard, and the other thing that happens with compassion fatigue, there was a recent research into first responders, and to look at, well, what is it that causes them to burn out a bit more? And it's when they get a surprising phone call. So in the workplace context, it's where you've got a colleague who you thought was thriving, and they phone you on Friday afternoon. A client was describing this to me yesterday, the day before, that she had a phone call with a colleague who she thought was, you know, fabulous. They're in Melbourne, and this woman broke down. And my client said to me, I got off the phone and I felt drained, because I knew that, you know, it's our 6th lockdown in Melbourne, and it's, or whatever it is, and it's too much, and there's no end in sight, and there's a tunnel. And, you know, those of us in Sydney, we all want to come to Perth, Tally, and, you know, not just for the beaches, but, you know, I think that what happens is that when your expectations of a person as being very functional, and then they're giving you really difficult news, and there's the compassion and understanding, but there also needs to be the time after that phone call to look after yourself. And so the activity we did at the very beginning of today's workshop, which is based on Dr. Adam Fraser's work, The Third Space, which you've probably seen in my blogs, I modify a bit and I play around with, and I take poetic license, and I take some ideas from some of my colleagues. It's this idea of, well, what's going on for you at the moment? What do you need to park and write down what's your emotional reaction. Then we're going to do a relaxation. Now, the one we did was really quick. It was short, but there are plenty that are longer. And then there's a refocus. And so for my client, she said, it's Friday afternoon, the workday was over, and it was like, what special meal am I making for my family for dinner tonight? Because I want to bring some joy into the weekend in my household, even though it's not going to be any different to last night's experience. And so she needed to take that pause. And actually for her, she ended up doing an hour yoga class, because that's what it took for her to regroup, because the emotional experience because what her colleague was feeling was a lot of what she was feeling herself. And that's a challenge for us in normal times, and it can be exacerbated at the moment by what's going on. So the idea of giving, absolutely, but there needs to be some awareness around the type of help you have and and who you help. So I think that's the other thing. It's the nature of the help, the type of help, how you look after yourself once you've given help, but also that you listen to some of the gossip. And no, I'm not condoning the gossip of the matches, but some of the gossip around, hang on, that person's a taker. That person's going to sap the life out of me. They're going to take this fabulous proposal that I've spent 4 hours preparing. They're going to send it off to the client, and they're going to put their name on the bottom, and they're going to get the KPIs. And okay. And in those circumstances, what the giver needs is a couple of phrases, a couple of polite, prepared phrases to be politely assertive, to say, oh, look, I'd love to, but I can't. And that something like that works for people interrupting them all the time. Something like that works for people who are takers, where it doesn't quite sit. And it's where, and those conversation enders, if you observe people in the workplace, there are a couple of people who are just brilliant at it, and you don't even notice that they've done it until it's happened, and because it was so seamless and so polite and so appropriate. It's worth preparing. The final thing that is quite fun in the book is this idea of what we call a 5-minute favor. So what the researchers found was that there are some givers who have mastered the art of the 5-minute favor. So it's, well, yes, can I offer something of unique value to this person? So it's back to my specialty, my area of expertise, what I have to offer that other people don't, but that's only going to take me 5 minutes. And I often think, well, if all I give people who attend my virtual lunches is an introduction to somebody new, that's my 5-minute favor. But not to be self-depreciating, but don't underestimate who you know and who can be of help when you can't. And sometimes you can't because you are too busy, emotionally able to, or you just haven't got a clue. It's not your expertise. And the other thing in the 5-minute favor is good, honest feedback, because no one, it never ceases to amaze me of how many of my clients, and the brief is something completely different. They go, Tamar, I've got to tell someone that they're not very good at X. I said, okay. And how long has it been going on for? A couple of years. Oh dear, right, okay, where are your feedback skills? And as for praise, compliments, where are they falling along? So if in your 5-minute favor kit is actually a couple of ways of giving people really useful, positive and developmental feedback, you're giving, and that can be potentially, now my creative juices have come, that can be a creative way of bringing a giving culture within your organization without it being corny. You're getting people to do it in a way that is natural, that fits with who they are and what they want to, how they want to behave in the workplace. And so what I think will be worthwhile for us to do now is, I know I normally end with a start, stop, continue activity. So what that is you take a moment to think about you're going to start, stop, and continue. But before we do that, I want you to do another exercise that relates to giving and to boundaries. So I want you to think about, take a moment to write down for yourself, before I put you into the breakout rooms, what is it that you feel you have the expertise? And my sentence is terrible. I'm looking at my notes. It says, what would you give about? So what would you like to be known to be giving to others? Where is it? What is that for you? So take a moment and just write that down as you set some boundaries. And the second thing to write down is, how are you going to be politely assertive when there are too many requests? And as is often the case in my life, or it could be the bias of the type of emails I receive, but randomly in the last week, an org psych from overseas just sends this email around how to politely say no. And I have a client who's very senior in a government department, who always talks about the minister has some shiny new object, so shiny new project, and next thing you know, that's what they're all doing. And there is an art to explaining that, yes, with pleasure, I'll take on this new project. However, out of the ones I'm currently working on, which can be delayed or done by someone else, or perhaps not done. The colleague who sent the blog on the topic ended quite humorously, because he had clients push back at him because he had taught them so well how to establish boundaries that he thought, well, you have learnt well when you're saying to me, no, sorry, if you'd like me to do that extra bit of work to achieve your goals, I'll have to say no to something else. But he took that as a reflection of good transfer of learning rather than, but it's just sort of another way of thinking about setting the boundaries, and to remind yourself that if you spread yourself really thin, then you're not achieving anything for anybody. So what I want you to do is just write down the date, and based on either something I've discussed today, something that's on the top of your mind, or something that's just that you've been thinking about for a while, what is it that you'd like to start doing, stop doing, and continue doing? And when you've done that, just make eye contact. Stop. And now, so you don't lose that note, email it to yourself. And if you want me to keep you accountable, send it to me too. And what I'll do is I'll put a note in my diary, and sometime around the 12th of September, I haven't looked at what day of the week it is, I will send it to you. I don't read them. I just send them back and go, hi, this was your start, stop, continue. It would be fabulous. And I just want to, well, I popped this song at the end because it's a fun tune about giving. That's I don't know. I think Rihanna's got it right. I don't know. She's definitely got the beat right, but I think she's sort of got a bit about the whole.
Yeah. Rain Man is back with Little Miss Sunshine. Rihanna, where you at? You have my heart, and we'll never be worlds apart. Baby in magazines, but you still be my star. Baby, 'cause in the dark, you can't see shiny cars, and that's when you need me there. With you, I'll always share. Because when the sunshine, we shine together. Told you I'll be here forever. Said I'll always be your friend. So no thumbs to get out to the end. Now that it's raining more than ever, know that we'll still have each other. You can stand under my umbrella. You can stand under my umbrella.
Just in the tail end of.
Oh no, keep going. She gets a bit silly, but I think, the simplest thing to do is share an umbrella with someone. I know there's much more profound things going on in that song, but I guess it just ties into the idea of the 5-minute favor, that the giving culture and the way you give can just be that little. To whoever has to leave, cheers, thank you. I can also email through the survey link if it didn't come. And thank you all. Thanks for reading my blog and being in touch and connecting in all sorts of ways. And nice to see all your faces.